everyone. Welcome to our monthly LinkedIn Marketing Lab. I'm Alex Abel, and I'll be your host for today's class. I'm an Enterprise Client Solutions Manager working on our technology vertical here at LinkedIn. I oversee campaign strategies, ensure you're hitting your KPIs, and seeing ROI on the platform. I'm joined today by two very fabulous and incredible marketing experts. I'll let them introduce themselves shortly. Today's class is all about content marketing strategies so you can level up your ad campaigns. We'll explore why content is key to engaging professionals and making your brand stand out, as well as best practices for distributing your content effectively on LinkedIn. You'll ask questions by entering them in the box on the right-hand side of the screen. And on the left-hand side, you'll click on Agenda. You'll have access to the deck and additional resources. We'll also be sending a recording of this presentation out to you guys via email in the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. And lastly, there will be a survey at the end of the lab, so please use that to let us know if you have any feedbacks or suggestions on what we can do better. With that, I'll hand it over to our two presenters for today and let them introduce themselves. I'm Sarah. I'll kick it off to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Tominari Field. I'm an enterprise account executive here at LinkedIn, specializing also in the technology vertical. And I help my clients build out strategies that will help them grow their businesses on LinkedIn. I'm really excited to be here today, streaming live on LinkedIn, talking about one of my favorite subjects, content marketing. So thank you all for joining.
And hi, my name is Kyle Scriven. I'm a senior content marketing solutions consultant here. Long title, but I work on content marketing strategies with brands and our clients of all shapes and sizes. I covering things from full funnel content marketing approaches to high-level marketing strategy to your ABM campaigns, etc., and really helping clients to put their best marketing foot forward when it comes to LinkedIn and all of the platforms they're engaging on.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. We'll jump into the agenda for today. First, we'll start with current trends and then go into the evolution of content in LinkedIn, embracing a brand to demand strategy, followed by executing your strategy on the platform, content creation hacks, and mastering the LinkedIn newsfeed. Kicking it off, I'll start with current trends. So in a recent survey that we've done back in March in 2020 around the coronavirus outbreak and the current status of the platform, we're seeing members flocking to the platform more than ever for trusted information. 40% of LinkedIn members report reading the news more frequently now. 55% are saying year-over-year increase in conversations among connections on LinkedIn as people look to reconnect with their network during this unprecedented time. 30% are checking social media more often to stay up to date on, what's kind of happening in the world around coronavirus and as that continues to evolve. And then 60% are saying year-over-year increase in content creation on LinkedIn. So people are posting more now than ever on the platform. We're also seeing a huge increase in the organic activity on LinkedIn. So 8% increase in weekly posting on pages, 10% increase in content shared by pages, 26% weekly increase in original posts with native video, and 13% increase in thought leadership by sharing third-party news. Brands should have a voice and communicate with consumers via social media, live streaming, and advertising. People are really hungry for this type of content right now. 44% of respondents report spending more time on social media because of the virus. 30% are saying that social media should provide live streaming of events at this time. As you can all imagine, we're all working from home. Live streaming is so important right now. 76% of respondents approve of how large corporations have handled the outbreak. And 73% of respondents agree that brands should advertise as normal. So with that in mind, I'm going to kick it off to Kyle for the evolution of content in LinkedIn.
Thanks, Alex. So one thing I like to start with when I'm having these conversations with clients is getting them to really understand how the world is changing when it comes to marketing, the amount of competition you're facing as a marketer, and really the process that your end user, whether you're in B2B or B2C, is going through to get to a place where they're going to ask you for help. customers are making it about 90% of the way through a purchase process before they're ever going to think about giving you some information, reaching out for a demo, etc. And during that period of time, they're typically going to connect with about 10 pieces of content during that process. There used to be this old kind of adage that you would build one piece of amazing content and then that would, do all of the things you needed it to do. It doesn't really work that way. Content has just evolved too much, and you need to be developing content at a more frequent level in order to reach your customer where they are. Beyond that, what we're seeing is that audiences continue to be self-directed. They're doing their own information searches. They're relying heavily on social networks to learn about vendors and kind of other people and entities within their sphere as they're looking to make decisions for their business. And the number one place that people go for information in purchase stage is their online professional networks. So LinkedIn is obviously one of those and the largest, but there are a ton of online professional networks, alumni groups, et cetera. I can give you anecdotally just for me, not just in a purchasing, like for a business standpoint, when I was looking to buy a mattress for the first time in 13 years, I came to LinkedIn and kind of polled the group. Asking like, hey, what have you heard of these different kind of bed in a box or mattress in a box companies? And it was a great place to get kind of unfiltered opinion and also connect with people who worked at some of those companies in order to get even a deeper dive in that space. In thinking about content marketing, it's helpful to look at this. So this is a Google Trends chart, and you can see this like massive uptick in activity and search volume around the term content marketing. And that in itself is proof that content marketing is having an impact and benefiting businesses' bottom lines. People in business, marketing, advertising, et cetera, they're not going to engage in something that isn't impacting their bottom line in a positive way. And what you can see is that LinkedIn has evolved over that time as well. It went from a platform that was helping you connect with people you work with and people you went to school with to a really full-fledged and fully well thought out content destination. There's a trending section. There are hashtags you can follow. The news feed is immensely important for the way that people consume information now, and that really speaks to the way that LinkedIn has evolved to meet the challenges, the needs, and the wants of consumers when it comes to content marketing. One way that I try to help crystallize this for some of the brands we work with is getting people to understand the mindset of LinkedIn members. And this isn't to denigrate other platforms, but I think what people need to understand when they're thinking about LinkedIn is that it might be the same person you're reaching on each platform, but they're in a different mindset, and it means they'd be interested in different content that way. So I'll just ask you, and you guys can put it in the comments, without looking, what the trending topics on Twitter are right now. I'll give you a second. But today, I pulled this morning, right before we set this up, and the three trending topics are Dan Snyder, Hope Hicks, and Spirit. Dan Snyder is the owner of the Washington football team. And I say football team because they've changed their name, or at least have said they're going to change their name. But there seems to be more news there as well that is impending. And so that's trending on Twitter, as well as I'll skip Hope Hicks and go to Spirit. And you would think like, oh, this is really positive. It's actually about a fight at an airport with some passengers and some employees for Spirit Airlines. So that's what's trending on Twitter right now. Whereas if you look at LinkedIn, you can see a totally different mindset as far as what would show up in the upper right corner in the curated trending section on LinkedIn's platform. Jobs on the rise amidst of like the job markets that are on the rise amidst the coronavirus crisis. The load that is being put on working moms because of this pandemic, and then the general rise of cases that we're seeing across the country. Again, you could be reaching the same exact person with your content on these platforms, but they're expecting something different when they get to LinkedIn. Another thing to think about is the intent behind LinkedIn users when they come to the platform. I know personally, when I'm on Twitter, I have a beautiful niece and nephew, but a lot of times when I'm like watching them play a sport or read a book or watch Moana for the 100th time, that's when I'm on Twitter and that's when I'm on Facebook. I'm trying to kill time. And we did a survey on this to see if anecdotally, or at least research would bear out what we thought. And what we saw is that most people, when they come to LinkedIn, nearly 75% are coming specifically to accomplish a task, not trying to kill time. And that speaks to the differences in LinkedIn as a platform. You need to develop your content in a way that speaks to that intent nature. You should be building content that reaches your customers' pain points and says, the person you're reaching wants to accomplish something while they're on the platform. Is the content I'm developing going to help them do that? They're also seeking information. So this is trends and tips that still remains the bedrock of the newsfeed environment. But what I like to highlight on this slide is that if you look at the kind of bottom three here, industry events, product or service information, and employee perspectives, those are really things that are natural and native to LinkedIn as a platform that isn't really the same on other platforms. And so if you are in this space and want to be a leader in this space, whether it be industry events, or if you really are looking to make an announcement about your product, it should be happening in LinkedIn. Not only are people most receptive to it, or more receptive to it on this platform, it's what this platform is good at. That intent mindset also leads to just greater ad receptivity. I know that in some conversations I've had with clients, and I've also worked on the client side before, I've been in-house, I've been agency, platform now, but what you see on LinkedIn is an increased receptivity, almost 2x to ads. And so while there might be a slightly higher CPC or ROI, depending on how you're measuring your marketing campaigns, what you're getting on this platform is an audience that's qualified and more receptive to your advertising. And in a world where advertising rates are changing and fluctuating rapidly, and brands and certain companies have less money to spend on the platform than they had before, there's an opportunity to enter a market that is already more receptive to advertising. Again, kind of keeping this thread with intent, they're coming to achieve not just professional goals, but also personal goals. They're taking content from 2 million news publishers. They want insights. They're leveraging the LinkedIn Learning platform. I personally, I took obviously we're all kind of working from home now. I recently took a drawing class, a group drawing class with my team here internally at LinkedIn. And that made me kind of pique my interest and my love for drawing when I was a child. And so now I'm taking a fundamentals of drawing class in LinkedIn Learning. And again, like this is something that, you can't, you just aren't able to get on other platforms. Moving on to the next slide. Members trust the content they're seeing on LinkedIn. And I bring this up in almost every presentation that I have, in that for 3 years running now, LinkedIn is ranked at the top and cited as the most trusted social platform in nearly every factor. This is Business Insider's intelligence ranking platform or ranking survey. But again, like that trust is not just something that we get to leverage as a brand. It's something that someone who is advertising or publishing content on LinkedIn, gets to advertise or gets to utilize as well. We see anecdotally that when a brand's first interaction with a customer happens on LinkedIn, there's an inherent level of trust because of the platform that you might not have on other platforms. Furthermore, what we're seeing as LinkedIn continues to be this content destination is that mobile is the key. And I'm sure this isn't rocket science to anybody who's joining this discussion today, but we know that 80% of the clicks on sponsored content on LinkedIn are coming from mobile devices. So when you're developing for the newsfeed and for LinkedIn, you want to make sure your content looks great on small screens. And we have some tips towards the end of the presentation that will help you with that. One thing to talk about again as LinkedIn makes this kind of huge switch into becoming a content platform is video, and why video is so compelling. I'm going to assume that everyone in this conversation has heard the old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Doesn't seem like something like, if you haven't heard this, please say in the comments. We'd love to know if you've just never heard this saying before. But another thing to look at video, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, video, we've done like some quick back of the napkin math, it could be worth as much as 1.8 million words. And we've actually done the math here to try to figure this out. Now, again, this is not a one-to-one solution, and this is anecdotal, but what we want to express here is that video gives you some depth and a kind of deeper canvas. If I go back to my drawing discussion, a bit more depth and breadth in how you can tell your story on the platform. What we're seeing additionally, we have some internal data here that shows that members are spending more than 3 times more time watching video ads as compared to static content on the platform. And that just serves to reinforce the point. Video is increasingly important. It's not the only thing you need to leverage on the platform. I know that when you hear these conversations from other platforms, it's like video is the only thing. But I do want to stress how it can really kind of put rocket fuel into your campaigns as you're able to explore a lot of different ways to connect with your audience. So some key takeaways here. LinkedIn has evolved to become a content destination, and that's not just through the homepage with the trending topics and the hashtags, but we've also developed a variety of options for publishing content, whether it be things like being able to publish a PDF and slide through it directly in the platform. There are a bunch of different ways to create content that really fit the platform in a native way. We're also seeing that brands have a natural fit within the news feed. You would think, and I think there's been a challenge as kind of LinkedIn has grown and progressed along this sphere, that they're not necessarily saying like, oh, well, it's for professional development. Brands belong in the platform, and especially when you see the real intent around the members of LinkedIn, there's a definite space for brands to play there. And how members are engaging has evolved. We just spent a lot of time talking about video. People are engaging with that content more and more. And as a brand, you should be looking at that. Going to move over to what kind of content actually works on the platform. And as we do that, I will kick over to my colleague, Sarah, who will start with that.
Thanks, Kyle. So as far as what kind of content works on LinkedIn, today we want to focus on why it's important to embrace a brand to demand strategy or a full funnel strategy on LinkedIn. In the traditional marketing world, I think most marketers are employing either a brand and or demand marketing as part of their strategy, where brand marketing is about creating those memorable links between the brand and relevant buying situations that help to drive longer term growth. And demand marketing is around creating urgency around specific offerings and services to ultimately drive to short-term growth and KPI metrics. But in the digital world, we often find that marketers are favoring short-term efficiency over long-term effectiveness. We've recently released a study on marketing and ROI, and of the marketers that we surveyed found that only 4% of them measure the impact of their campaigns beyond 6 months, which means that most of us are actually focused here in the action or bottom of the funnel content. And if you take yourselves out of your brand shoes and put yourself in your audience's shoes, you start to see that this is what their news feed looks like. We can go to the slides. Here's an ad for Apps Flyer where you can download their guide if you fill out a form and give them your information. An ad from Binder, who is also promoting a guide if you fill out their form and give them your information. Spiceworks has an awesome piece of content, State of IT Marketing, that's available to you if you fill out a form and give them your information. And then finally, Intercom, start a free trial, test out their product today if you fill out a form and give them your information. Now, just pausing here, I think that it's important to note that this kind of advertising and demand-based content is in no way incorrect. Quite the contrary, it's actually really effective. And these ads that we're showing here are actually great ads for demand generation objectives. That said, I think the story and the message that we're trying to get here is that it's also important to be incorporating a level of brand within those demand gen pieces. And research actually supports the fact and the need for a balance between brand and activation content to help drive overall growth. Last year, we partnered with two market researchers, Peter Field and Les Binet, who basically analyzed years and years of data from the IPA, or the Institute for Practitioners in Advertising. We asked them to put a B2B lens over this, and they have found that it is absolutely important to be incorporating brand building content to not only help increase the effectiveness of your lead generation content, but to help future-proof your brand. And through the data, they found that the ideal split between brand building and lead generation content is actually 60-40. Now, most of the brands that we kind of see out there today on LinkedIn have this equation flipped, or even more so weighted towards the activation side. And again, that's not bad. This content actually works. But the more and more that we can get closer to that split of 60-40, the stronger the opportunity we have to actually grow our brand and future-proof it. And LinkedIn data actually backs this up. So this is internal data that we have here at LinkedIn. And we've also found that when you're balancing brand and acquisition content together, that our members are 6 times more likely to convert or engage with your content than if you're focusing on only acquisition or brand. So that's the kind of case, the short story for why we feel really strongly, especially during this time when content is being engaged at with such a high rate, that we do need to incorporate a level of both brand and demand content into our strategies on LinkedIn. Now, where do we start with our content strategies? First, what I like to talk to my clients a lot about is kind of going back to what Kyle was talking, is let's take a step back and start thinking about, why do people actually come to LinkedIn? Well, they're coming to LinkedIn to be more productive and successful in their professional lives, and they're engaging with content that's going to help them do better and be better in the jobs that they have today, and even the jobs that they have tomorrow. So these are the top 5 reasons for content engagement on the platform. It's relevant, it's educational or informative, to stay on top of the latest brands, it's inspiring, and it helps with skill development. And when I'm talking to my clients, I like to actually say we should focus on things like relevancy and inspiration. Because in the B2B world, and especially I think the nature of LinkedIn being a professional platform, a lot of the content that we are producing or we're seeing that's out there hits on those other 3. But if you can tap into relevancy and tap into inspiration, that's when you're really going to find that you're going to be standing out in the news feed, standing out from all of the other content there, and really engaging in an authentic way with your audience. Second, you should look to define the stage of the journey that your customer is in. And when we talk about the traditional marketing funnel, I think we can get really hung up on what's top of funnel, mid funnel, and bottom funnel. But much like the earlier conversation about brand and demand, we want to simplify this by saying, let's break this into 2 very distinct stages. First is the education stage. And these are audiences who don't know who you are, or they may know you, but not in the way that you want them to know you. And they're seeking information to get a better understanding of who you are as a brand. The types of content that work really well within this space are things like industry trends, market perspectives, thought leadership, and events. Kyle will talk a little bit more in the following section about the thought leadership research studies that we do with our partners at Edelman. But I think thought leadership can come in a variety of different forms, where it can be thought leadership from you as the brand, but also, don't forget about your employees, your subject matter experts, your executives that can be voices, and credible leaders for your brand. And the second piece of the journey is action-based content. So these folks have already gone through the education space where they know who you are, and now they're actually actively seeking to engage with you. Your content should be, solution specific, that's actually going to help to guide them through the rest of their decision-making process. The types of content that work here are customer stories, product and service information, demand gen content, offers like demos, free trials. I think it's also important to note that in the action-based content, not everything actually has or should be gated, but this is where gated content would live. Then finally, understanding the intent. This is a really meaty one. Why are people coming and what's important to them? And I think, if you can start by asking yourselves these three questions, you'll be in a really good spot. One, what does your audience want? You should be looking at things like audience insights and research, tapping into your internal subject matter experts. I think we naturally kind of default to product as our subject matter experts, but I would encourage you all to, tap into your sales teams. They're at the front lines of your business, speaking to your customers on a day-to-day basis, and really are the voice of that customer. And from a LinkedIn standpoint, we can provide insights around trending content and trending hashtags. The second question you should ask is, what are you a credible expert in? What do you have the authority to actually talk about credibly? And you can look at things like historical performance. What have people been engaging with in the past? LinkedIn can do a topic ownership analysis where we look at a variety of different topics and outline which ones do you actually have the credibility or the connection to actually own. We can also look at brand sentiment analyses that look at what are people saying about you on the platform through comments, and how are your ads actually being received. And then finally, where is there untapped opportunity? And you can look at competitive audits. I love doing competitive audits for my clients. Proprietary data sources, and then also a LinkedIn white space analysis where, again, we can look at a set of topics and also define, where might there be clear white space on the platform to actually talk about and get some additional engagement. Okay, so I'm going to close on just a few examples or a couple of examples. The first being education content. And I love these examples here from Goldman Sachs. I think by nature of the business that Goldman Sachs is, they have the ability to really have really awesome educational content. But what I like about what they do is that everything that they're putting out here doesn't really have any kind of chest beating spin on it. They aren't really even talking about themselves, but they're leveraging their subject matter experts or experts in the field to provide some real value to their audience, thus creating a halo effect on the entire brand. And what's flipping through here right now is first was a branded video series called The Long and Short of It that are insights on the most pressing topics for investors. The last few were about the future of esports, and what they do really nicely is kind of take snippets of this really big, meaty kind of topic, break it down into small bite-sized pieces within their ads that also have movement within the news feed that gets people to stop, engage, and then click through off to their website to learn more. And then in the action-based content side of things, Slack does an awesome job. They're a very well-known brand who also does, education content. But on the action side of things, what I love, this one here is a checklist report, but they're talking about this being specifically for IT leaders. The more and more that you can be specific in your copy about the audiences that you're trying to reach, the stronger your chances of engagement, because you're bumping up that relevancy. This one's here, a white paper geared specifically towards enterprise companies. The next one is a webinar for customer stories, but they call out the different customers that they're featuring so that you can leverage this third-party branding for credibility. And they've also done a really nice job. This is a really recent ad of theirs that adds relevancy because they're talking about timely topics. They're featuring a customer that moved their workforce to work from home. And then finally, Slack also does a great job of leveraging a lot of video in their action-based content. So this is a small snippet of animation with closed captioning over it, which we always recommend, that then drives to a demo piece. So those are a couple of quick examples of both education and action-based content. And from a key takeaway perspective, first and foremost, let's start to look at incorporating both brand and demand in our strategies, specifically on LinkedIn. To consider the current LinkedIn member mindset and behavior. Why are they coming to the platform? Why are they engaging with content? And use it as a lens to talk about the content that you're developing today. And then finally, develop content that helps to get to the intent or what's important to your audience. I'm going to pass it now over to Kyle, who's going to take us through executing your strategy on LinkedIn.
We're actually going to pause for a second. I'll kick back to Alex. I think we have some questions.
Hey guys, so a couple questions from the audience. Sarah, I think this would be a really good one for you. Are forums a good ad type for lead generation? What else would you suggest?
Absolutely. I would also suggest, so there's two different ways that you can collect leads. One, you can use your ads to drive to a website page and a landing page that has a form. But we also have a product called Lead Gen Forms, which allows you to keep your customer within the LinkedIn ecosystem. So the ad talks about what the actual ask is, whether it's to download content, register for a webinar, etc. And then when the user clicks on that, a lead gen form will pop up in platform and pull through any information that we already have within their profile information. And you can also add in additional forms where the user will self-input information on their side.
Amazing. Thank you. And just one more if we have time. I agree that video works better than picture. Can you expand on what kind of video content works best?
I guess I'll take that one. Okay. I think it's tricky. Like I hate giving the answer of it depends. I end up giving that a lot when I chat with some of the clients, and that there aren't always a one size fits all set of answers. We are working on some research right now that we hope to make kind of customer facing really soon when we talk about different types of video for different verticals, but also for different objectives. So I think about that a lot when I think about the right type of video to use. Is your objective brand building? Maybe you're going to have a longer video that does a bit more to tell the story of your brand. If your video objective is getting someone to come back to your website, well, your video should be relatively short. It should have a clear call to action. It should have the branding up front as quickly as you can. And you shouldn't kind of belabor the point. If there's something you want them to take, if there's an action you want them to take, hopefully you've done the work and all of the groundwork and the baby steps in getting them to kind of understand more about your brand, going back to what Sarah discussed earlier. And you've kind of done that brand, you've built that that foundation, and then you're using a shorter video to specifically get back to and drive to a specific action.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. We'll kick it back to you, Kyle, for executing your strategy now on LinkedIn.
Great. All right. So we've talked about some trends on the platform. We've talked about LinkedIn's content evolution. We've talked about the mix of brand and demand, which is a hugely important point, one that I love covering in these conversations because I think that people focus I think what you see in certainly digital platforms, because there are measurements available, there's this tendency to just measure what you can measure the easiest. And a lot of times that's your bottom funnel content. But there's a ton of evidence that having that mix is really important. And so as you pivot into executing your strategies, we like to kind of give people examples from other places. Like when I do these presentations, a lot of times people are like, well, tell me what other B2B brands are doing. And I could, but I think you can learn a lot of lessons from some other spaces as to how to best develop content for this platform. So one thing you see in the movie space, and I know it's being disrupted right now, but just take Disney, for example. Disney went and made this massive investment in 2 huge movie franchises over the past decade in the Marvel universe and then the Star Wars universe. And what they've done, they probably release less movies now than they ever have before, but they're making more strategic bets on stories and topics that have a propensity for success. If you take the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have your tentpole movies, which are your you could say the Avengers. I'm obviously into this, but then you have your kind of niche stories, whether it be Ant-Man or Black Panther or Iron Man, and maybe you won't love every one of those niche stories, but you'll probably be interested in them if you're interested in Avengers as a whole. Again, that interest in investing in your repeatable content franchises, you can see here in the chart, like the movies that are the highest grossing movies of 2018 are there's basically sequels and things that came from already existing intellectual property. And again, you can apply that to what you're doing from a content standpoint. And then the extensions. So like I discussed, you have you have your Marvel Cinematic Universe, but you also have things like the Star Wars universe, and you'll have the Mandalorian on Disney Plus, but you'll also have things like the Han Solo movie. But again, it doesn't all have to be the one piece. You can build derivative assets, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Attention spans aren't dead. I think that's like I try to make this point in almost every presentation that I have. What you have, though, is that people who are less willing to spend time on content that they're unsure about. So if you can build these franchises where they know they're going to get a certain level of quality, you're going to see better returns and kind of better metrics depending on what you're measuring from a campaign standpoint. There are tons of formats to try when you're thinking about how to execute your campaign. This is a good chart that I like that talks about, what types of content have tended to perform best. This is data from the Content Marketing Institute, CMI. But when trying to either create new audiences or generate demand, looking at things like blog posts and articles when you're in the awareness and interest, the early stage. Whereas when you get down to late stage, you might be looking at case studies. The caveat I put on this is that you might realize through testing that it's actually the exact opposite based on the audiences you're trying to reach. So this is a good guide for when you're getting started. I wouldn't say this is like a end-all be-all rubric for like, hey, I'm starting out, I need to start like leveraging ebooks or guides or podcasts. Like you may determine that your audience is most interested in podcasts and they work across the funnel. The only way to get to that is testing, and we talk about that a little later in the presentation. One thing to think about as you're building out and starting to execute your strategy, think about identifying your format. I have a couple examples here on the screen, whether it be your how-to guides, your state of reports. Future forward content tends to perform really well on the platform. Your trends reports, especially after a larger conference, or like hopping in and doing an analysis of what user journeys look like in your field. But then think about how you maximize the utility of that content. A lot of times what I see in the brands that I work with is that they're developing content and they're putting all of their time and effort and money into these big concepts. But then it's just one post and then it kind of goes away. There's an opportunity to take these posts and turn them into multiple pieces of content. You could have an ebook that leads to, but that ebook has video content that can stand alone. You can have blog content that can be pulled from that ebook. There could be static content, graphics that can also be pulled from that larger ebook content. So pick that one piece of kind of big rock content you want to build, and then start pulling derivative assets from it. Another thing to think about is when you are developing content, larger pieces of content, make sure that it can extend across social. Too many times I work with brands and they've developed content. They've probably developed it for one platform, whether it be television, or they've developed it for, either Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, et cetera. But they haven't made sure that the content they've made, the longer form content they've made, can extend well across social. This is a project we've worked on with Aetna. And so you can see here, this is what looks like an ebook here on the left side. But what they did is they included graphics that could easily be turned into social content. A lot of times I'll work with brands and they'll say, well, we just don't have the resources to build 2 versions of content. You don't have to build 2 versions of content. It can all exist in the one piece of content you're making. But if you're intentional and thoughtful when you're creating that at the beginning, you can make it so that it can be extended across your social campaigns in a seamless way. One way so as a quick example here, Bain Capital did a great job with their Bain Briefs series. So this is like an analysis of the future of mobile banking, which may not be something that everyone is interested in, but the way that they've done it is they've created so many different derivative assets and different ways to approach this. Like a thing that I try to convey to everyone that I present to is that your customer is not always in the same place. They're not always thinking the same thing. They may not have time for a 20-page ebook. They may not have time for a 15-minute video. They might have 30 seconds, and you need to be able to reach them in that way. Otherwise, you're going to miss the opportunity to start building resonance with them. And Bain's done a great job at that. They have within their larger Bain briefs, so they have in-depth analysis on this on mobile banking, but they also have graphics that help give you some information without making any additional asks of you. There are videos you can engage with that will help you understand what you'll get out of the larger piece of research. Infographics that are being broken apart into static graphics to filter across a variety of social feeds. All of these work to kind of build that halo effect that I know we discussed before, or that umbrella effect where, I may not want to personally engage with a 40 or 50-page white paper, but I might watch a 5-minute video on how banks are accelerating the migration to mobile and making that a more seamless process for their customers. Content and thought leadership content specifically, there's this thought that you can only do it one way, and if you do it, it will work out great. And it doesn't always. I wish I could say that there was a silver bullet and I could give you a blueprint here and everything you do in that will work and never have a negative impact on you. But as you can see here in the slides, one of the things that you see here is that while good content does lead to actions, positive actions, especially thought leadership content, after engaging with it, whether it's following that organization or increasing respect or affinity, or purchasing decisions, you see increases there. But in this same research, and this is research that we did in conjunction with Edelman, specifically focused on thought leadership, people will take negative actions if they think the content isn't good enough. They'll stop following an organization or a specific person if they're not learning or not getting something out of the content they're seeing. Bad thought leadership will decrease the respect for an organization. Sometimes I know that this is something that comes from crisis comms. Sometimes the best thing you can do is say nothing. We're not advocating for that, but we want you to start thinking about ways to make your content more compelling, because it's not as simple as just if you build it, they will come. You need to make it good as well. All right, so what content works? In that same study we did with Edelman, there are kind of 3 key areas to think about. You definitely want to differentiate your brand from your competitors, but to go back to something I discussed earlier, thinking about your customers' pain points. provide insights that are going to help them accomplish something, change something, either personally or professionally. Create content that is related to what people are working on. That's a huge factor when people are engaging with content on the platform. And then, like I said earlier, people are really interested in future forward content. So to that end, try to lay out a clear vision for the future. So in kind of getting to what tools are available to help you, I'm going to kick over to Alex, who will talk a bit about some content creation hacks.
Thanks, Kyle. So jumping into content creation hacks, we have a couple good tricks for you guys. First is our content partner program. If you go to the next slide, we have an amazing built-in network of partners that you can leverage if you're working with a LinkedIn account team currently. This is ranging from video solutions like VidMob and QuickFrame to written and visual thought leadership pieces from like Red Connect. The ultimate hack is you don't have to do everything yourself. We have third-party vendors that can really help you guys do this and take pieces of content that you might have already put out there and reinvent them in a certain way, or slice and dice videos in a certain way, and then optimize on performance based on those kind of creatives. Jumping into the next slide, this is a couple of examples that we have from our content partner team that they've created for clients like Cisco and Adobe. They're net new material. They were created using material that the customer had but hadn't put live. And then they've done thought leadership from blogs or ebooks. So some really great pieces of content here that have worked really well. Going into the next tip, create from existing sources that you already have. So if you take a look on your company website, you can then kind of look at from there your company blog, company resources, the About Us section, and then PR and news. And you'll find you probably actually already have more content than you thought. Repurposing these types of materials on LinkedIn is totally what we would encourage. We don't want you guys to have to reinvent the wheel every time you guys want to push out an ad campaign. There's some really great resources that maybe teams that you don't work with all the time are already publishing, and customer success story videos. I mean, there's so many great resources that can be leveraged from your company website in these different buckets that we'd highly recommend looking at, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then if you go to the next tip, create from third-party resources. So thought leaders, industry publication. We have a really great tool called What's Trending on LinkedIn. The caveat here is don't only push out third-party, material. You definitely want to have an equal balance, but leverage the What's Trending on LinkedIn tool. You can look for a certain audience and what they're engaging in specifically. If you really care about IT decision makers, you can see what the top trending content is that they're leveraging. So definitely take a look at that. And let's see, the next slide would be utilize free tools. So Animoto is a great tool to leverage for video. I know we had some questions come in from the audience about DIY video. Animoto has like pre-built templates for LinkedIn that enables clients of any size to quickly make a video optimized for the platform. Super easy, so definitely would recommend checking out some of these free different tools. And then another tip is repeat your greatest hits. You don't have to always create net new content. If you had an ebook that worked super well last year, LinkedIn always does a sophisticated guide for marketers. You don't have to, reinvent the wheel. We use that every year. We update it a bit, but we don't really change that much except update with the latest trends. So definitely leverage, what's performed well in the past and utilize that again. And then I'll kick it back to Sarah for mastering the LinkedIn newsfeed.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and I could go on and on forever, but for the purposes of today, we have 4 quick tips on how to master the LinkedIn newsfeed. The first tip is, I feel like we've almost talked about this ad nauseum, but visuals are the new headline. They're because of the mobile nature of how sponsored content is being engaged with, you definitely need to ensure that your visuals are eye-catching. What I like to talk to my clients about is, open up your phone, scroll through your own newsfeed, put yourself in your customer's shoes. What kind of images actually stop you from scrolling and engaging? And we like to call that thumb stopping content. The second is that, don't only think about the visuals. You also have a lot of real estate within that ad space for copy. Your copy should be concise, compelling, be clear. One of the biggest mistakes that I see advertisers do is that they don't utilize the full space, and they have their intro copy mimicking the copy that's also on their image, and then mimicking the copy that's on their headline. It should create, all those three pieces should create one cohesive story within the ad unit. And then the third point is around user experience. I actually saw a post in the feed about getting clicks and not downloads, and I would encourage you to look at what your user experience and flow is, and making sure the steps that you want your customers to take are as streamlined as possible, because you can have the best creative, people can click on it and click through, but what they're getting either on that lead gen form or the landing page that you're driving to, if it's not consistent, then you're going to have a lot of drop off there. And then finally, we've talked about this as well, but especially on the LinkedIn platform, test, and test again. We have somewhere about 2 new members joining every second. And so the audiences that you're reaching are growing and changing, as well as the different types of content that are also competing for the same eyeballs. So you want to always be nimble and be able to pull pieces out that aren't working and drop a new piece in to test again. For those of you that work with the LinkedIn team, I would advise you to consult them on helping you to build out what is the proper A/B testing strategy and plan, and leverage them to help you, review and optimize and recommend what's next if something else isn't working. So again, those are just 4 really quick tips that we have today. And I would encourage you all to take a little pause and think about what are 1 or 2 optimizations based on those ideas that you can make with your sponsored content ads today. And now I'm going to pass it off to Alex, who's going to wrap us up and bring in another Q&A session to close us out for the day.
Thanks, Sarah. So the 4 main key takeaways that we have for today, LinkedIn has evolved as a content destination and as a place of aspiration and discovery. As you guys have seen, the feed has evolved tremendously over the last 10 years. So we're really excited about what the future has in store for LinkedIn. Focus on fulfilling the audience intent. When you guys are thinking about building out content, think, how is this going to help my audience? What are they going to gain from engaging with my ad? What kind of benefits can this bring to them? And really think with a member mindset. Diversify your content delivery, but aim to do more with less. Have static images, have video, play with different ad units that are available on LinkedIn, like sponsored content, dynamic ads, in-mail, etc. There's a lot of different strategies that you guys can use and leverage depending on the objective at stake. And then set your content up for success in the feed with impactful and informative visuals and copy. We have a lot of amazing resources on our website about best practices, content creation hacks, and we'll also share this deck out with you guys again, but leverage the resources available because there's a lot of good stuff out there. We have a couple other labs for you guys as well if you're interested. Fundamentals of advertising, if you really want to get onto the basics, building a content marketing strategy, which you guys just completed with us, advanced strategies on LinkedIn. So if you want to learn more about, conversion tracking, website analytics, retargeting segments, really kind of getting more into like the nitty gritty of the campaign manager platform and building out more advanced strategies, that's a really great one to attend. We also have using LinkedIn for lead generation. So all of you guys who are really interested in driving sales pipeline, building leads, this would be a really great one for you guys to join and learn from. And then we have a whole lab dedicated on reporting and analytics. So a lot of great resources available for you guys here. we'll do our last Q&A, and then hopefully you guys can take our survey at the end to let us know what we can improve on and what you guys enjoyed about the lab. So I'll bring back Kyle and Sarah. Amazing. So let's see. Sarah, I think this would be a really good one for you. Do you have any recommendations for content to reach/attract the C-suite? Is there any data on LinkedIn usage by the C-suite?
Oh, yes, the ever elusive C-suite on LinkedIn. Well, one, we can actually pull audience insights. So you can reach out to your LinkedIn teams and we can dive in a bit deeper about how the C-suite is interacting on the platform. Are they, is there more mobile usage? Are they sharing more often? But one thing also that I think works really well is video. We have research right now that shows that decision makers are actually interacting with video content or prefer to interact with video content over text. So the more that you can try and leverage in video content into your strategy, I think is a really nice way to test and learn with the C-suite.
Amazing. Thank you. The next question. I run my sponsored ad. My content is good. I'm getting a lot of clicks, but not downloads. How would you approach this? And what tools do you recommend for planning content creation? So I can take the first part of this question, and then Kyle, do you want to take the second part? What tools do you recommend for planning content creation? Do you recommend scheduling content in advance?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So for running sponsored content and getting a lot of clicks, but not a lot of downloads, I would ensure that you have conversion tracking set up on your landing page so you can see the demographics. If you go into your campaign manager tool, you can see who's clicking and getting served impressions for your ad. And then you can see, if you're using conversion tracking, who's actually filling out the fill form on your website. And then if you see, okay, if you're targeting IT decision makers, manager and above are converting better, and director and VP are not, filling out this form, you can then exclude those titles from your campaign. So the overall takeaway here is leverage conversion tracking to optimize best for if that's your ultimate goal for leads, and then leverage the demographic reporting within Campaign Manager. If you go into your Campaign Manager tool, it is at the top of the screen. It says demographics, and then you can filter by different targeting facets that we have on LinkedIn. And I would also just make sure that you're having a clear CTA in your copy of what the person's going to anticipate when they do click on this ad, and make sure that you're mobile optimized.
I would also say too, just to tack on to that, is that we have different objectives that you can build your campaign around. So if conversions is actually what you're really going after, then set that as the objective of your campaign, and the system will help you to be able to optimize to that objective.
Yeah, as far as the second half of that question, you guys, you both covered that in the same way I would have covered it in a presentation for clients. But the second half of that question, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree in that you should be developing a content calendar, even if your content calendar is paltry. And that sometimes means I work with clients where they're like, well, we publish, once a month. And I'm like, okay, that's not ideal, but what I would say is that build out that calendar, even if it's once a month, because it will give you some incentive to start building out that calendar. And you look at it each month and say, okay, I have one post. What if I did 2 posts? What if I did 3 posts? And you can start to see that incremental growth because you've challenged yourself to build a calendar and scheduling your content. It also helps you think about content that is timely. I think every platform can come in and tell you that while there's not necessarily a mandate that you need to chase trends, if your brand isn't connected to the trend that is happening, you don't have to find a way to wedge yourself into that conversation. But if there are natural things happening that your brand can be a part of, scheduling your content is a great way to get ahead of that and start to think about times of the year, times of the month, times of the week where your content can and really have a chance to resonate based on what's happening within your vertical.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Next question. Does LinkedIn have instant messaging where we can engage with potential clients as a company? Who would like, Sarah, you want to take it or?
So we don't have instant messaging, but we do have what's called sponsored messaging. And there are two types of sponsored message products. One, shows up as an email within their inbox. And the second one is actually called conversation ads. And it's a newer ad unit for us. And you can basically kind of take your user through a choose their own journey. So you can send them a message and ask them if they want to engage with your website or if they want to learn more about a case study. If they choose a case study, then you share them that asset and so on and so forth.
Amazing. Thank you. And then I think this might be our last question of the day. Kyle, what type of video is better, highly professional or DIY video? Which is more engaging to the audience if you are B2B?
I love that question because it's a question I get asked in almost every presentation and every conversation I have. I think there's, and part of it just comes from, I think there's like, when you think about video, people tend to think about television, and television advertising tends to be very overly produced. There's a craft services truck somewhere. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. And people are like, well, I need to bring that to the social platforms. That's not always the case. Some of the best performing content I've seen, whether it be B2B or B2C, is content that was shot very low budget, maybe on a camera phone, maybe on like a personal DSLR camera, things where you're, especially when it comes to like launching products, showing the product being used by your regular average Joe tends to, and I've seen that perform substantially better than the overly polished piece of content. It doesn't mean that that content won't work on the platform and won't meet your needs. But what I try to encourage people is that you don't have to hit those heights on every piece of video content to get the returns you're looking for from a video.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, I think that is all the time that we have for today. We will send this deck out to everybody at the end of the show. Please fill out the survey. It helps us get better and make improvements. And thank you guys so much for joining. We had a great time, and we'll see you at one of our next labs.